Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Knitting with Sam Barsky. I'm Sam Barsky, and as you notice, this is what I'm wearing today is my ski sweater. And I'm wearing it today because we're about halfway through the Olympics, and I wanted to wear it for one of the episodes I did during the Olympics. So that's what I'm wearing today. And what I'm working on now is the same sweater as last week, which is, it features sweets. So here's the progress I've done so far. On the front you see there's a cake. There's some cupcakes at the bottom of both sides. There's some petit fours, some eclairs, some ice cream cones that are on the back. So I've been calling it a sweeter. Sounds like New Zealand accent a lot. Except that, of course, in New Zealand they call them jumpers. And speaking of the word jumper, I call this one I'm wearing now a jumper as opposed to a sweater. The word jumper is used in some English-speaking countries. And since this one has ski jumpers on it included, I call it my ski jumper. Emphasizing on that word. That's used in countries such as the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. So anyway, the stage I'm up to on here is I just have to carve out a neckline like this. I've done everything on the side except for that. So that's what I'm going to do today on today's show. So I'm going to get started here, since we have 60 stitches across. Not many sweaters I do have 60 across. Usually they have more like 80 or 90, but the numbers are different because this is 60. So what we want to do is split it on each side and take 18 stitches from each side and leave 24 in the middle for the neckline. So I'm going to first start off by knitting the first 18 over here into 17. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So I'm going to stop at 16, double check I have the right number. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And then I'm going to take the next two, which are numbers 17 and 18, and knit them as if they're one. So there we go. And I have some other equipment I'm going to show you. So this is a stitch holder. I'm sure many of you have used stitch holders in different ways, in different projects I want to use. I have someone who wants to join me in my video, so I'm going to give someone a chance. This is the first time. Hello. Hello, here's my guest. What's your name? So that didn't work out too well. I guess technically it didn't work out, but anyway, I do want to bring more guests onto my show in the future. So I got the first 4 onto the stitch holder, and I want to get 24 in all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So I got my first 24 onto the stitch holder. I'm going to close the stitch holder, reverse it around like this so they won't fall off accidentally. And I'm going to double check the number of stitches I have here. It should be 18. So I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So there's my 18. So I have with me another, as you see, the feeder here is one skein of purple, and I have with me another skein of purple, unless it just rolled away. This can happen sometimes. Here it is. Here's my other skein of purple. So I'm going to use a separate skein of purple on this side and on this side. So I'm going to insert the needle into stitches 1 and 2. First 2 and then 1. And then I'm going to take like maybe about a foot of it. At least a foot. Because you're going to need it in the end to close up some holes. And then I'm going to drape it over like this. Just like when you add a yarn. And then finish the stitch with it. And then before I take stitch 2, I'm going to take that 12-inch tail, cross it over the feeder, and then I'm going to knit the rest of the row in it. There are a total of 8 rows here that you use to finish off the neckline. And there we have the first of 8 rows done. And now that the first row, there are some things I'm going to show you in the second row, and then after that everything is easy. So the second row is just purl until you get to the stitch closest to the neckline, just normal purl. And then on every knit row thereafter, there's something I'm going to show you also, a technique you should know when you do this. And this will go pretty fast because this is bulky yarn I'm using. So I stopped at at the last stitch. I haven't done it yet. I'm going to take the tail, cross it over the feeder like this, and then I'm going to purl the final stitch here. And there we go. And here I'm just going to purl it all the way down. And here's 17 stitches I have to do here. And then after that, I'm going to show you something in each knit row that we do to make the shape of the neckline. You want to make it go outward like that. So I'm going to turn these 17 stitches on each side into 16 this time by combining the last 2 stitches in one, just like I did in the first row. So I'm going to knit the first 15 stitches, and then number 16 and 17 will be knitted together into one. We do this on every knit row. So this is the 3rd row of the 8. You don't have to do it on a purl row though, just a knit row. So I'm going to stop with these last 2 stitches, and at first I insert the needle knit style into stitch 2 and then stitch 1. So that takes care of that side, and here you start off by doing it first. So here's the feeder. You don't want to mistake it with the tail. The tail is important for later. We use the feeder and we go into the first 2 stitches, knit style, first 2 and then 1, and then knit them into 1. And then there are 15 remaining stitches, and you just knit to the end of the row. So I have a deadline to get this entire sweater done by Thursday evening. That's when the Knitting Olympics, the Ravelenics it's called, concludes at one of the local yarn shops. And in order to claim my prize, I'm going to have this done there. I'm hoping to walk in there wearing it. So after this, I have the neckline to do, which I'll show you a little of today. And then after the neckline, I have to do 2 sleeves. These sleeves, being that they're bulky, go very fast, very quickly. And then as you see, I'm still purling this, and then I have to put it together. I have to attach each sleeve onto the body of the sweater, and then I have to sew up the seams, and then I have a ton of nitpicking to do. I have over 150 nitpicks to do. I've counted so far. I'm going to have more. As you see, look at all of this stuff. So it's a ton of nitpicking, and I don't have to do all of it by Thursday night. I can always save that for later. But the bottom line is I have to make it wearable by Thursday evening, and I'm hoping to wear it then. So here's the next row. This is row 5 of 8. Someone is asking me how long these needles are. I've never measured them, but I've heard they're about 14 inches long. Needles of this length. These are like the standard size needles that I'm using. As you see, I combined the 2 stitches into one again, and once again, since this is a knit row, I'm combining the 2 into one, just like I showed you on the previous row. And there we go. And now here's row 6. So in row 6, to make sure, because row 8, the final row, will have 14 stitches. This should have 15, but I'm going to double check here. So I'm going to count to 15. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have the right number here. And then here, I'm also going to check to make sure we have 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So everything checks out now. And now the final pair of rows here. This is going to be with 14 stitches. The last 2, once again, will be brought down to 1. It's the last time we have to do that here. And then after that, after I do the row after this, I'll show you the 3 needle bind off. So I brought the 2 stitches out. Here's the last time bringing 2 stitches down to 1. And it's just knit across. And then 1 more purl row after this. And then I'll get to show you the 3 needle bind off. There will be 28 stitches that I'll do that with. I'm going to count it once more to make sure I have the right number as we do this. So insert, this is a purl row. We insert the needle purl style, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So there we go. Good to go on this side. And here on this side, we insert it purl style once again. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And now this is finished. So now we can do the 3 needle bind off. So what we want to do now is, I'm going to take this one. Here's the outside of it. So we put the 2 outsides together like this. So the insides, where all these strings are loose, face outward. I have a needle cap on this one. I'm going to take it off. And here we proceed with the 3 needle bind off. So what I'm going to do right now, this is how we do the 3 needle bind off. Some people will do Kitchener stitch in this situation, but me personally, I prefer the 3 needle bind off. So we're going to take a needle from the front and transfer it to the stitch from the needle that's holding the front, and then switch it to the needle that's holding the back. Then I'm going to insert it into these the third needle, which is the needle has nothing on it, into the first knit style into the stitch that's holding the back piece and then the front piece. And then I'm going to knit them into one, and then there's one stitch here. So I'm going to repeat that process again. So transfer the stitch from this needle to this needle, knit into both of them, and it'll come off on the second needle. But before we proceed to the next step, you take, as you see, there are 2 stitches on this needle. You'll never have more than 2 stitches at a time on this third needle, because you'll always be taking stitch number 2, pulling it over stitch number 1 like this, and then you're left with 1 stitch. So we'll be keeping on doing that throughout this, each half of it. So once again, transfer the stitch, knit into both of them. Here's the 2 stitches over. And sometimes this will slip off. You just put the stitch back on. Here we got it again. So you can push it down if you are worried about it coming off. So we slide these up, transfer the stitch from front needle to back needle, take the feeder from here, insert it knit style into these 2 stitches here, and then knit the stitch like that, and then take the bottom part and pull it right off. So we're going to do this about 10 more times in all. And then we'll proceed to the other half of it. So hopefully you'll have the idea of how to do this. So once you get the routine, it goes pretty fast. So every stitch you just transfer from the needle holding the front side to the needle holding the back side. When you do this, knit this stitch, you first enter into stitch number 2 on this needle, which was stitch number 1 before you did the transfer, and then into the stitch that you just transferred. And then you just carry it off. It's a pretty easy technique to do once you master it. And I think it's easier than Kitchener. People might have different opinions on that, but when I was a new knitter, when I made my first few sweaters, I was doing Kitchenering, and I found this was a lot more practical. So now we're down to our last 2 stitches here. And now, finally, here's the last of the stitches for this side, and then pull it off. You're left with your final 1 stitch here. So what we want to do at this point is you have to find the feeder ball of yarn, which is right here. Put your hand into here so as not to lose the stitch. You can stretch out the stitch and put your wrist into it, and that way you'll prevent it from losing it. Untangle it from other, you might find this tangled into some other yarns, especially if it's a multicolored project. As in my case, this is tangled into yarns of other colors. So you just try to untangle it, get it loose like that. Here, now it's free. And then you take the entire ball. You don't cut anything. One thing you did not want to do yet is cut anything until you finish the step. So you put the ball through this big loop you have, which is the large stitch, and then gently pull it, gently until it forms a knot here. And you don't want to cut this at all. Whatever it is, this is what you'll be making the neckline out of, hoping you have enough of it. If you don't have enough, that's another story, but if you do have enough, so you don't want to cut this at all. And this hopefully will be enough for doing the entire neckline. If not, then we'll have to add in another skein to finish off the neckline. So this I'm going to let drop down for now. And here, this is where we take a circular needle of the size, needle size and length that you're going to be using to do the neckline, which will vary depending what size sweater you have. So I'm going to take 32 stitches and move them over onto this. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So that's the right number. So what we do now is we take a stitch holder and then we put that on top like a needle cap, put it on top of here and on top of here. The needle cap is not absolutely necessary, but it's a good idea. So once again, we want to make sure, one of the things that happens sometimes is some stitches will fall off the needle. So it looks like 3 stitches have fallen off. So I got it 3, 6, 9. So I have the right number for sure, but some of them have fallen off this end, which happens sometimes in this situation. So we can put them on back on here on this end. That's all taken care of. And then now we proceed to the other side. So we slide these down toward the end, not off, but toward the end. And we line them up. And then we take that third needle once again. Third needle has to be the same size. You should always use needles of the same size. So I'm going to transfer this stitch here onto here. And then I'm going to do the same procedures as on the previous one. That's my first stitch, and then you make sure you have no more than 2 stitches on this third needle, and then you pull it off. So here's this off. It's once again a total of 14 stitches. If you don't use bulky yarn, if you're using something thinner, it'll obviously be a lot more than 14. Sometimes I've had to do as many as 30 at a time on each half of it when I use smaller yarns. And we might have to redo some of the stitches that fell off this end when it wasn't holding, which happens quite a lot. And you can use these needles to do that. If I have to, I'll show you how to do it. Because once I finish the back side, I have a ton of people anxiously who want to see what I finished so far, and in transit they tend to fall off. Because I do carry this around all the time to show all my anxious fans who want to see this so badly. When you're like me, when you go to knitting groups all the time, everyone is curious about your work in progress. As I am about other people's too, so that's part of the cost of it is having these stitches fall off. So here's the final 2 stitches. It looks like it'll be okay. So here's what you want to do. We have to re-knit these 2 stitches. So I'm going to, before I do the next, this stitch is on the 3rd needle, and I'm going to use this little piece of yarn to re-knit these, re-purl these 2. So I'm going to go just do a purl of this and a purl of this, and then I'm going to transfer these back onto this needle, and then resume what I was doing. So I'm going to, as I was doing before, this needle, this is just like any other stitch, and here's the final stitch. So as you see, there's only 1 stitch left on each needle. So I'm going to do, this is the needle from the front project. I'm going to transfer it onto this needle, which is, I was holding the back of it. This needle we put aside for now. We're going to need it on the sleeve, but we don't use it now. This tail over here, we cross it over the feeder, and we knit these 2, and then this needle we don't need any more at all. This was holding the back project. I actually prefer to use metal needles for that purpose, because as you said, I carry it, as I've said before, I like to carry it around, and the metals are the least fragile of them when you do that. But you always, if possible, want to use one the same size. Now I have these 2 stitches left on this final needle, cross the 2nd over the last, and now we're left with this tail over here. This you do nothing with for the moment. And then here's the other yarn, is the feeder. So we're going to take this stitch, make a big loop out of that. The feeder goes all the way through, and then you pull it tight, gently but not too tight. And then this is the first time on this show in which I'll be using the scissors. So what we want to do is, you want to make sure these are about the same length. They definitely have to be long enough so you can nitpick them later. Weave them in, maybe about 4, 5, 6 inches is good. And then you cut this free from the feeder. And this will come in handy later, so save this piece of yarn. And now, as you see, we have this, and it's inside out. So we're going to turn it the right way. So here, now you have your 2 pieces fused together. This, as you see, is a birthday cake over here with candles over here, and just like my Hanukkah sweater that I've shown you before, these candles are also made of the glow-in-the-dark yarn, these flames. And then there's also flames on the cupcakes below, and petty fours just like are on the back. So here's where we want to transfer the stitches. So what we're going to do is start on this end. We want to get this to go in through 7 of these stitches. The way we do that, this is one of the hardest techniques of all. So we want to go under stitches here, but that are independent from one another. So one will be on this side of the seam over here, and the other 6 on this side of the seam. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So here's the 7 on here. Got that. It worked out. Now we take this once again. We got to transfer it. You switch this back to the way it was before. So now these will flow off. So you transfer each one of these onto your circular needle, one at a time, very carefully so you don't drop them. And then gradually, little by little, so you have to make sure you don't drop a stitch. Like, I can do this fast because I have a lot of experience with it, but if you're doing this for the first time, do it very slowly. Now, we can put this aside. We will need it later. I always use it when I attach the sleeves. But other people have other techniques like that, so depends what you do. You may or may not need that later. So now I have to get this onto 7 stitches. So I'm going to start at this end. This we don't need anymore. So I'm going to start, once again, I'm going to start by doing 1 stitch on this side of the seam over here. It'll go under here. And then 6 more on this side. So it's 1, 2, 3. This is the feeder yarn, and it can get in the way sometimes, but you can just push it aside. Here's another stitch for number 4, if I can get into that. It can be a little difficult with some yarns. I made it. 5. And here's number 6. I'll use this as number 6. So then I get a total of 7, and I'm going to transfer them back from this side to this side, because you always want to start at the seam when you knit your way around. So here's the seam. This is the feeder yarn. So what I'm going to do, here's a ring. You can use any, there are stitch holders, markers, and things that look like rings, that you can use one of those, or you can do anything ring shaped that easily fits over this needle. This is just as a marker to let you know when you finish a row. So I'm not going to do the full neckline on this show today. I'm just going to do a little bit to show you how I do this. So here we just do it alternating knit purl stitches. So here's, I'm going to take the yarn I showed you. You remember what I said I was not cutting before. So now we're going to start knitting with. So you go knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and once again knit, purl. So you do that all the way around, alternating knit and purl. And I usually do 8 rows, 7 are just knit purl, and the 8th row is a cast off. And there are 70 stitches around in this particular sweater with the bulky yarn I'm using. In some of the thinner yarns I use, I've had to do as many as 90 around before, more than 90. Usually, given the numbers that I use to do this, you end up with a multiple of 2, an even number that is not divisible by 4. So in this case it's 70, sometimes I have 74, 78, 82, 86, like that, 90. So in the first row you have to be careful to remember when to do a knit and when to do a purl. Every row after that it'll be more obvious what you'll have to do. So if you forget whether you're at a knit or purl stage, then you can just look at the stitch below and you know what to do. And you also want to keep good count of what row number you're on within it. Now we've reached that tail that I was showing you from before when we added the second skein. So you want to cross that over your feeder, because this tail will come in handy when you do the nitpicking in the end to close up any holes you might have. But for now, you want to lock it in, so you make sure of that. Here, this stitch is backwards. That sometimes happens with those stitches you add along here where we inserted the needle, so we can just switch it back the other way. Sometimes that's what will happen, and it'll feel more comfortable to knit into it if you switch it back like that. So the yarn that I'm using, by the way, which I have lots of, and you can get it pretty easily. It's a bulky yarn. It's Deborah Norville Serenity, and it's a box store yarn. I really do not like to use box store yarns. I normally prefer to use nice quality yarns from yarn shops, but this is a bulky yarn that is very readily available. It comes in many, many different colors, many fabrics too, types of patterns as well, so you can get variegated, you can get some that's tweedy looking, you can get solid color. So if I have to make a quickie, like a sweater in a week or two, I will use that to make it, just like to show for a certain purpose, because it works on size 11 needles. But for something to wear every day, it's not what I really prefer to use. I prefer to use like the nice yarn from the yarn shops, which is more comfortable to wear. This stuff doesn't even look that bad, but it has some nice things about it. It's machine washable. But given the circumstances, I had to knit a sweater in 2 weeks. I used this from my existing stash. You can get it at Joann Fabrics. That's the only place where I've seen it. Here we're about to complete the first row. So one thing you want to do when you reach that ring, and now we've reached the ring, you purl the final stitch here. You transfer the ring from this end of the needle to here, but you don't knit into the ring, whatever you will do, or else the ring will become a part of this sweater. That happened to me once before, and to get it off, I had to cut the ring and sacrifice it. So now we start row 2. I'm going to end shortly, but I'll show you row 2. Here it's obvious which stitches to knit and which to purl. This will be my 118th lifetime sweater. And since it has a picture of sweets like baked goods and stuff like that, I'm planning to take a picture in front of the window of a bakery. Wherever I can find one around that looks like it'll match the scenery, that has some cakes and cupcakes in the windows. One of the reasons why I chose this design is because I was under a lot of pressure to make a birthday sweater. And one of the drawbacks to this bulky yarn that I'm talking about is, like, it can feel nice to wear on a cold day. It'll keep you warm, but if it's too warm, you don't want to wear. Or if it's too warm inside, this is not what you want to be wearing, comfort-wise. So I was thinking, people want me to wear a birthday sweater on my own birthday. But I was thinking, my birthday being in November can either be a nice hot day like summer, or it could be a very cold day. It could be like winter. The weather can vary a lot, especially in the Baltimore area. So if I can't wear it all the time on my own birthday, I could wear it to birthday parties I go to of other people that take place on cooler days. So here, it's just an easy knit and purl. As I said, I'm not going to do the whole 8 rows on the show. I'm going to go up to the next point in which I reach the ring, and then I'm going to end the show, and then I'll do the rest of it later. So on the sleeves, I'm going to put more sweets. I haven't even decided yet, but I have the yarn for it right here with me. A lot of choices of color. Someone suggested I put like little party balloons on it. That might be an option too, even though they're not edible. I've thought about donuts or danishes. Just anything that sounds delicious. Maybe pieces of pie, because I haven't put any pie on it yet. Or other things that are used like for birthday decorations. Like someone said that the red yarn was perfect because the specks of other colors on it looks like confetti, and I actually agree with that. So we just have like maybe about between 10 and 20 more stitches until we reach the ring. So I'm going to end the show then. Thank you everyone for joining. I will answer your comments soon after I end this, at least some of yours. It might take all day. I'll get to them a little at a time, and I'll transfer it when I get a chance to Instagram, and where you can see the first minute of it, and to YouTube, where you can see the whole thing. So I'm going to end it right there. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye. Until next week. Bye everyone.